Domain 1.5 is about configuring, working with worksheets and workbooks, and then being able to distribute them. So it makes sense that we're going to go to 1.5.1, setting a print area in Excel. Let's take a look at that. We've got a new set of data today. We're going to look at the hospital data. And the hospital data has one worksheet, and we have a list of patients, doctors, their length of stay for the patient, whether they had insurance or not, the percent of insurance they had covered, and their deductible, just kind of to give us something to work with. When we talk about setting a print area, I also want you to know when we go File, Print, that is going to print that worksheet, okay? So we're going to go ahead and pick our printer, which happens to be an HP today, and it's showing you the worksheet that will print. And you can kind of look, this worksheet's rather long, so it's got several pages, and actually all the columns didn't fit on the same page. So let's just talk about that for a second. We can go down to scaling, and we can choose fit all columns on one page. Now, the other thing you can do, and now you can see our deductible has rolled on over to the same page, so we're not going to have that one little piece of deductible at the end. You can also remember how we change orientations. You can go from portrait orientation that we're in now. Remember the whole page layout orientation? And then we could go to landscape. And if we did that and we went to print, obviously all our columns would easily fit on the page, but we'd still have several pages. Now, if we wanted to make sure all this data only fit on one page, maybe we were just going to refer to the data real quick and it would be all right if it was tiny, we can come over here back to scaling and we can say fit sheet on one page. Now realize, look at your font size now. When we click fit sheet to one page, that's rather hard to read. So probably not practical. Probably not at all. We go back to no scaling, and there we are, easy to read. But you might want to do something like make sure all these headers were showing up on your other pages, because who knows what number 62 means without flipping back to percent coverage back here to several pages. So we can do what's called setting a print area. And we're already on the layout tab because we wanted to go ahead and play with orientation. I can go ahead and say I want to have a print area. Here's my page setup. So I've gone from the home tab way down to the layout tab to page setup, and now I'm going to pick print area. So let's set print area. You selected a single cell. That won't work. We want to make sure that we have this print on all the pages. Okay, so we can go ahead and click print area, set print area, and now that what we did just now, only the headings should print. So let's see what happens. Let's go into our file, print, and you can also go Control P on a PC computer or Command P on a Mac. And you'll notice it only printed our headers. It did not print our data. Not real useful. Let's take another look at something else. So what if we go print titles? So in print titles, it's saying you want the print area, but where do you want it to repeat? Well, I want on every page, row 4 to repeat. Okay, so with the patient, doctor, length of stay, insurance, blah, blah, blah. So I go OK or print preview. And now you can see, well, we didn't get our data again. Let's try again on that. May need to undo our print area. Okay, let's try that. And let's go back into print titles. And yes, we want to repeat row 4 on every page. And we're going to go OK. And let's go to File, Print Preview and see how we look. And there it is on page 1. What's going to happen down on page 2? There we have it again. Patient, doctor, length of stay. Makes the data a lot more meaningful, that they can be on any page and see what that column heading is. So setting your print area and setting print titles is really important. And the one that worked best for us today was setting print titles and making sure we copy that to every page. I hope you found this helpful. Domain 1.5.2. Save your workbook in alternate file formats. You may not really think about your file format, but let's talk about where that's at. Okay, so right now we have a workbook with one worksheet down here. All right, and I'm going to just rename this so you can see that it's the worksheet inside a workbook. I like to think of it like a file folder with a bunch of pages in it. Our workbook or our file folder is 1_5 hospital data. Our worksheet is the first tab, or any other tabs we add. We can add numerous tabs, okay? So let's go to worksheet and learn how to save. When we go initially open an Excel file, you want to go File, Save As, and you're naming that file. We named it 1_5 hospital data. Right now, we're saving this file as an Excel workbook, and that is the default choice you want to pick every time. But look at all our choices. In the beginning here, we will always be using Excel workbook. As you get in the advanced levels, micro enabled, binary enabled may come back. Excel 97 to 2003 is if you're working with an older file. Most of your Office 365 material will be compatible and will open that older file, but sometimes you may have to look at it this way. I'm going to clip on down and go on to, you can make an Excel template, tax delimited, we did that at the very beginning, but the most common alternative format is PDF. And PDF means that the document has been saved in a print document file, and basically what you see on your computer screen is what that person who's going to open it is going to see. However, PDF is not changeable or alternative. It prints really easily, the file's smaller, but it doesn't let you make changes unless you have an advanced copy of Adobe. And that's not a common thing. So, I mean, an advanced office or a larger office would have it, a small office wouldn't. So I'm going to show you that I'm saving it PDF. I'm going to change the title and put PDF in the beginning. I do this for me. The icon that it saves into your computer is different, but I want you to easily see when you rename things that this is a different copy. This is not your working Excel copy. This is your printable copy. So I'm going to go ahead and go save. And then what should happen is that Excel, here we go, should open that file in a PDF reader. It may be Adobe on your computer. If you don't have that, it may be Microsoft Office's version of PDF or easy to print. So I wanted you to see, you can see I can't click in here and make changes, but it's easily printable, and we still have our titles from our last activity. So that's an alternative way to save Excel in different forms. Depending on your assignment or your task, depends on which format you want to choose, but most of the time you're going to be choosing an Excel workbook. Okay, so we're back to our original Excel workbook. We don't have PDF there in the front, and we finished that task. Domain 1.5.3, print all or part of a workbook or workbooks. So what we want to look at is this hospital data now has 3 tabs, and so that's 3 different worksheets. If we wanted to print the whole workbook, we would go File, and then we would go Print. And now it is saying print only active sheet. So that would just be our first worksheet. But we said we wanted to print all. So we go into settings, we go to the pull down menu and we say print entire workbook, and that will print all the worksheets. But what if we only were interested in that data, that data that showed us the percent coverage by doctors and those patients that had a percentage of insurance that was covered of their cost? So we just want to print this page. We would go back to File, we would go to Print, we go, instead of Print Entire Workbook, under Settings, we would say Print Active Sheets, or Print Active Sheet would be just this page, and that doesn't look very good. We would definitely want to go back, go to our page layout, and change our orientation. And now let's take a look. File, Print, and again, we're connected to our printer. We just want to print our active sheet, and that looks pretty good. That's a one-page handout. It quickly tells people the percentage and the increase, and how our data is represented in a visual format. But what if we also, let's go back, what if we also wanted to print the other chart of length of stay by doctor? So why is Dr. George having his patients stay way longer? Well, we want to print this page as well as percent coverage. So let's go back and make this page orientation landscape too. Otherwise, we're going to cut off our chart. All right, and now you can see your marching ants right here between L and M. So that's where it's going to cut off on your page on the right-hand side. And so we want to print these two worksheets inside our workbook. So we go to File, Print, and again we go to Settings, and it says Print Active Sheets. I like to pick Print Selection, and I'm going to select page 2 and page 3. Okay. But what pages are that? So let's go back and check again. Okay, if we say print entire workbook, this is page 1, and you can't see this, so I'm going to bring it up here just a little bit so you can see. Down here at the bottom, it says pages 1 to 7. So what we're looking for here is what pages do we need to select, especially if you were printing a couple of these. It wouldn't matter if you just printed the whole workbook. But if you were printing 500, you wouldn't want to print this extra data at the beginning. So let's take a look as to where inside our whole workbook that we could see. So page 6 is our first chart of length of stay by doctor. And I'm going to click one more. And page 7 is our second chart title. We should have titled that, by the way, of our percentage of stay. So really what we're looking for is to print pages 6 and 7. So instead of printing the entire workbook, I'm going to go say print by selection, but I had to do a little research there. I want to print page 6, and I want to print to page 7. And then you would go to print, and it would print the right pages for you. Okay. That's how you print individual worksheets and your entire workbook. Domain 1.5.4, Set Print Scaling. We talked a little bit about this earlier in the video, but I wanted to show you one more time how I go about setting print scaling. Now, anytime you go File, Print, okay, by doing that, I'm going to unselect what we had before. The default is to print active sheets, so that's the sheet you're looking at. Do realize that instead of the whole workbook. But I'm going to go back now, and you can see the marching ants right there at I and J. That's where my page break is going to be. And we did have title selected, so even though it doesn't show here, here's our marching ants for the bottom of the page. And those titles selected will show on every page. But to print scale, File, Print, we want to go back into those print settings, but we want to come on all the way down to the bottom. At the current time, it says no scaling, but remember, we kind of worked with things. We went from portrait to landscape, and I'm going to revert that now. I'm going to go back to our page layout, back to orientation. I'm going to take us back to portrait. And when I do that, back in File and Print, you're going to see that some of our data is cut off. I can go all the way down to the bottom. That deductible is cut off. So that column will end up printing at the very end. And that really doesn't look professional if you're working at handing these out as a workbook. So what you can do in this situation, you could change your orientation to landscape like we did, so turning your paper sideways. Or what you could do is you could come on over here to scaling, and you could say, I want to make sure I fit all my columns on one page. So the columns are the patient, doctor, length of stay, insurance coverage. It would bring the deductible back out by fitting all columns on one page. And there they are. Let's undo that. So we're going to go back to, oh, I definitely don't want to print on both sides. Instead of fit all columns on one page, I'll go back to no scaling. So we'll drop our deductible down. And then if I go back down, I can say fit all rows on one page. Now it is going to take what we can read easily now and just smash it together. And it makes it so small, it's really not readable. I wouldn't suggest doing that. And you can also fit all rows and columns on one page, which means fit sheet the entire set of data on one page. And then it gets even smaller. Or actually it's the same size, but it smushes everything together. Neither one of those is a good choice for us. I think right now fit all columns on one page is the easiest to read. And again, when we go to print them, we would have these headers on every page that would make it easier to read. So that's how you work with scaling. It's worth coming down here and exploring. One of the things about scaling that's really important is if you're in PowerPoint, you can print more than one slide on a page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. If you pick 1 to 3, you can also have it with notes to the lines to the side, and that can be really professional in a presentation. Okay, guys, great job on Domain 1.5. Domain 1.5.6. Inspect a workbook for hidden properties and personal information. What does this mean? Well, as we create a document, it keeps track of where that document was made, by whom it was made, and on what computer. So if you're looking to remove that, you need to be able to go to the backstage view. So here we are on the home tab in our hospital data we've been working with, and we're going to go back over to the file menu, and over in the file menu you can see some properties. All right, the size of this file is 54 kilobytes. We didn't add a title, but we could. Hospital data, right? And we've been using that for domain 1.5. Normally you don't want to use points, periods, and commas in names. Naming convention, that's an underscore to represent that point. You can add tags for the meaning, the doctor's names, the patient's length of stay, percentage of insurance covered or not. Categories might be billing. Categories might be hospital data stay records per doctor, and that sort of thing. And here we have our two authors. Lewis is me. Christopher Davis is the one who originally created this file and was nice enough to share it with us. So that shows us some of the properties. But remember, we want to inspect that workbook for hidden properties and for personal information. So we're going to come here again. We're in the backstage view, and we're going to inspect this workbook. It says realize that there's document properties, and there might be other things like author's name and the path that it was saved on at your workstation. So we're going to check for issues here, and the first thing we're going to do is inspect the document. Before you inspect the document, make sure you saved your changes. We did. And now it asks us, when we're asked to inspect for personal property, usually we come back to this screen and we click Inspect for Hidden Metadata. It will inspect for other components, but that's the big one. Take out our personal information, take out our file path, and some of these can be security issues as well. I'm going to go Inspect, and it says we removed the following document information: author's name, release data, and that sort of thing. And we say remove all. And then it says, okay, your pivot charts have some personal information too. And we definitely will get into that with advanced Excel. Okay, everything else is looking pretty good. There's some invisible content and some objects. So we're going to remove all. We're going to re-inspect. And now that personal information is inspecting just fine. And so I would go ahead and rename this. I would call this whatever your title is, but you can even say inspected and maybe the date, so you know that, hey, we took out the personal information on this one and it's okay to share. All right, I hope you found that helpful. In 1.5.7 asks us to inspect a workbook for accessibility issues. Here we're trying to make sure that our document can reach those who might be visually impaired, hearing impaired, or need possibly software to read the information to them. So we have a check in the backstage view of Access. I'm going to go back to our original hospital file. Before we started removing and inspecting for properties. Okay, so I'm going to go to File. And here on the Backstage view, we can inspect our workbook, but we can also check for accessibility. And this says that the workbook checks for those people that have challenges being able to read. There's some tables that are hard for reader softwares. There are some font sizes and font styles. If they have serifs or extra curls or cursives, that can be challenging for a software. So you do want to take a moment to make sure that whatever documents you publish are accessible to all as best of our abilities. So I'm going to check accessibility. And when I do this, it says, make your document more accessible. Missing alternative text on the chart and missing alternative text on picture 2. So what we want to do is add accessibility to this chart. All charts are clickable. If you click outside the plotted area here in the white, left click to identify the chart, you get your dots that picture frame and say this is what you've selected. And then right click in that selection as well. We can go down to edit alt text. So that's alternative text for the diagram. And what we want to do is just say, okay, this chart indicates the length of patient stay by specific doctor. And 1 to 2 sentences, but something that's going to say, you could even say it's a bar chart if you wanted. You could even say that it identified the 4 doctors, Alfred, Bianca, George, and Winoma. But you want to visualize yourself, someone who can't see this chart, that it's going to tell them. And then the reader will still go and read components of the chart to the person using the computer. But it's important that you label all charts, all pictures, all icons, all graphs. So alternative text can be read by those readers and make it more accessible. Another good rule of thumb is a font of 14 size without extra curly cues, so it's easy to read and easy for the software reader to handle it. I hope that helps you a little bit with accessibility. Domain 1.5.8, inspect a workbook for compatibility issues. In this example, the term compatibility means different versions of the software we're using. Right now we're using Office 365. There's also Office Pro 2019, Office Pro 2016, Office Pro 2010, and various other versions. You'll even see 2003 to 2007 out there. So you want your Excel document to be able to open whichever version of Excel software that others are using. So let's take a look at that. We're going to open our hospital data again and again go to the Backstage view. We do that by going to the File menu, and here we have our choices to inspect the workbook. So we want to click for issues and we want to come all the way down to the bottom. And just like I was telling you, Microsoft's definition is check for features not supported by earlier versions of Excel. They said it way clearer than I did. I'm going to click for check accessibility, and it says a pivot table style is applied in this workbook, and pivot tables cannot be displayed in earlier versions. That's at 97 to 2003, and I actually, I'm working at the universities, and I actually still see that sometimes on people's computers. So you just need to be aware of that. In every one of those pivot table choices, I actually chose to insert a chart and let Excel pick its selection. That wouldn't have been my first choice, would be to have made a pivot table for a chart, but I went ahead and went with that. So you have it checked for compatibility. You know your pivot charts aren't going to, your pivot chart information, which is over on the side, I'll show you what that looks like, aren't going to show well, or will not show in Excel 97 to 2008. So some of this data will not show, and that's for you to understand. You can also get this pop-up of pivot table tools. The graph will show, the bar graph will show, but the pivot table tools up here to analyze, design, and format will not show in those earlier versions. So that gives you an awareness that maybe that wouldn't be a good choice if you knew someone with an earlier version would be working with this Excel document. Okay, we've run through all the domains for 1.5. I hope you had a great learning experience. Don't forget, do your best.